Hey folks, Steve here with another Nations in Arms video. In this video, we'll be looking at least at the fall of, or autumn of 1805 here in the Grand Campaign, the full campaign, or at least as long as we can keep playing it that way, before something disastrous happens and we need to re-rack for a new scenario with someone achieving some automatic victory. That is only a feasible reality because the British Navy, back in summer, suffered a series of pretty nasty defeats, and they're actually on the ropes a little bit with the French and Spanish navies enjoying something of supremacy by and large, though the British still hold the channel and they have a large fleet that's kind of blockaded in Gibraltar. Otherwise, in the more terrestrial look of things on the land war in Europe, the Spanish forces are headed west into Portugal. Let's see here, they're sort of headed that way. The small number of forces in Gibraltar really can't afford to do much else because the French could simply land a force and take Gibraltar and kind of put them in dire straits. Their supply issues are significant there. So the British are kind of locked up that way, which puts Portugal at the prey, or, basically they are prey for the Spanish at this point. It won't be long, probably this turn, we could see the Portuguese defeated. We'll see how far that goes. Might take until winter. Um, Otherwise, we still have a holding force here in Italy, not quite strong enough to push against the Neapolitans, given we have to maintain a garrison at Rome. So Italy's kind of quiet in the south. In the north, we still have two significant forces facing off. The Austrian army still has an impetus to try to besiege Mantua. It has not gotten the chance to do so because it has fought a field battle across that bridge and it lost. The French not quite having the numbers to confidently cross the river themselves against the Austrians. So somewhat of a stalemate. And then Napoleon destroyed Mack's Austrian army there in Bavaria and is poised to enter Austria proper, while remnant detachments of the Austrians struggle to find a way to form up and to join the Russians, which are currently heading down through the gap at Olmutz to face off against the French. So I would say, at least for what Napoleon has done, we're kind of on the tracks of history. The Russians, maybe walking into a bad situation against Napoleon himself, which again, the Grand Armée is a very potent force. Then otherwise, we do have a couple of fortresses in the Hansa area that the French have occupied. They'll probably head to Hamburg next, so making some advancements along the way. Off camera, before I started recording, I did do some diplomacy. The British spent the rest of their remaining money trying to influence Prussia and failed. So what's interesting is many of the other major powers have some money in the bank, but when you're playing two-player, only the French and the British actually do the influence checks. So I don't think that Britain can spend Russian or Austrian money on diplomacy. I don't think it works that way. So they had limited options themselves this time. So this being a fall turn, it could end up ending early due to a winter quarters chit pull after, I think it's the second time you pull it. So this could be a fast turn. France, I think, obviously wants it to last as long as possible so that they can do what they need to do, quote unquote, conquer Austria or put them in that failed, surrender state where we can get a peace deal. That does mean they're going to have to defeat the Russians. I think that's feasible, assuming that Prussia's not going to be in it until at least 1806. We have a lot of opportunities here to shut that whole thing down. Very likely, we'll see. And the more wear and tear we can put on the Russians, the better, as we slowly whittle away their commitment to the fight, as it were. So far so good. I think the other thing the French would want to do is indeed get into the channel, take control of the channel, and then in 1806, we build up some forces in France to cross the channel proper and be fighting Britain on their home turf. We may have the force uh, coverage to do that after a spring interphase where we can build back up. We can at least entertain the idea of doing that. So, very attractive idea because it is feasible for the French to do it. They can just wear out the British forces. The trick with some of this is, just by the way, you can only have 3 fleets in any given space, right? So you can't have 6 French fleets fighting 3 British fleets in the Channel. But what can happen is, um, it's about the number of dice you can roll. So we go in, the odds are even between these 2 fleets. So if these guys fail, we keep trying until they're out of movement points, and then we send these guys in, and we keep trying. Maybe we get lucky, and we remove at least 1 fleet from the British stack there of 3. Just doing that then makes a follow up attack all the more dangerous, and we basically put ourselves in a good position. So it's not that we have an assured way to overwhelm the British fleet. We just have more chances to get a good result that will eliminate the rest of the British fleets. It's a little bit different than, say, land warfare, where one potent fleet can actually do a lot of damage over time. But if you just have more fleets, you can afford more risk to whittle away the defender. And usually the British knock out the 1 or 2 good French fleets, and that's kind of the end of the story here. It could still go back on the French. It is conceivable, but we've just not seen it happen yet. All right, so now we're going to go to the cup, and we're going to pull from the cup for the first chit of the turn, and we'll end up seeing what goes on. All right, we're going to do the chit pull here, and we get, oh boy, all right, Empire Land 1. So everything of the French and its allies can activate and do something. I think in my mind, when I look at the chit pool, I think you want your 4 chit to come out first if you can help it. Getting the 1 chit out this early is tricky, because what it really means is that for anything that doesn't have a good leader with it, that you would want to have to activate. Like it may be the only time somebody activates at all. But I guess with the winter quarters chit, I don't know. It may be as a wash, but I think we can certainly make use of this. So everything can activate land-wise. I think there's some obvious things we'll try to do. I'll go activate those units, or those stacks, get them operating. We'll show the aftermath of that. You can imagine there'll probably be some action in Portugal, probably also from Napoleon in Bavaria. He may split up the army a little bit to cover more ground and kind of get things under control the way that they would want to. But we'll see how that goes. Yeah. All right. We'll be right back. Okay, so some pretty significant events have occurred. We played through a couple chits, and with the Empire Land 4, we did end up defeating the Russian army here, though it was a near run thing. They're demoralized. Napoleon's out of gas. He's also he's still got a potent force, but it's pretty worn out. And then we did take Vienna with Mr. Davout. And so this is a condition upon which I believe we would say the Austrians would be conquered, because they do not have. Well, actually, that's not true. If Venice is considered conquered and it's part of the national territory, I think it's still. Oh, I don't know. This is kind of a weird. This is where the game, sometimes feels like it didn't get baked quite enough, or again, language issues sometimes come into play. We had 1 Austrian army destroyed. So, I mean, we control Vienna. We need 1 other key city to conquer it, either Budapest or Prague. We don't quite have the movement to get up to Prague with anybody right now. We're just sort of out of gas, is the way it's looking. Maybe if I had done some other movements differently, we'd be in better shape to do something there. Granted, we can still potentially do something in the winter turn, so maybe it doesn't matter this turn. But the army here still needs to try to get into Mantua, but it's still technically sitting on national territory. So I'm not sure how else to deal with that right now, but we'll see. The demoralized Russian army's kind of in trouble because this is the really, the only potent fighting force that they have of significance. Um, they had all formed up. I think the foolish thing I may have done is that, I had collected them all under Alexander, and he's not a very good leader. And so we couldn't quite use all of our subordinate leaders to best effect. And maybe I could have figured out a way to change the command structure, but I don't think you can just leave the commanding general if he's the sovereign. So there's a little bit of a disadvantage that the Russians have there, and they were defeated. And they're demoralized, which means they're going to be trying to spend time to getting undemoralized before Napoleon can hit him again in the winter turn, I guess. Um, so that's kind of where things stand. We'll keep going to the cup and see what else we get. We get Coalition Land 4, which, let's see. He's not going to be able to activate. He will get to activate. So we'll probably see another assault here in Italy. And then everywhere else on the board, the coalition just doesn't have much that they can operate with. So we'll just have to wait and see what else occurs here. We'll come back. I may even pull the next couple of chits and just see how fast we can play through so we can get to winter and deal with all the conquest stuff in this video. Okay, I went through and played through the end of autumn. The turn didn't end a little bit early. There was just a couple of chits that got left out, but basically, I'd say the coalition is in rough straits. We're besieging Lisbon, so Portugal set to fall in the winter, which will wrap them up. The Hansa's capital fell, and that's going to collapse after the winter. The papacy is still under occupation, which will be annexed to France soon enough. And then, or maybe Italy, we might say, gets annexed into. I don't know how you want to look at that. And then the Russians, after their demoralizing defeat, rallied, had one movement point to attack Napoleon. I decided to go for it because if they had rolled well enough, they could have done enough damage to basically make Napoleon's army collapse enough that the Austrians would be in a better position, maybe, and be able to survive long enough to get into a production spring phase. Now I'm not so sure that's going to happen. And as it stands right now, these guys are still stuck with the dummy rule, as far as I can tell. Their attempts to take Mantua have again failed, and it's now 3 steps to 3 steps, which means if the French really wanted to, they could probably come across the river and try to knock those guys out. But it almost doesn't even, I mean, they might as well let the Austrians continue to be controlled by the dummy rule. They've still not gotten a siege attempt off, and the French are still fighting the field battle, using the marshes to good effect. That they might as well just let the Austrians kill themselves is basically what's going to happen. They've managed to avoid being demoralized, the Austrians that is, but there's not going to be much left of them here this next turn, depending on how quickly winter goes. The French do want to grab Budapest probably to make sure that we put the Austrians in that condition. And it's also likely that Napoleon may simply destroy that Russian army unless the Russian army can get away. It is going to depend on who gets the first chit, I guess, which is going to bring the Russian alliance credit down to probably 2, which is very, definitely putting them in a case where they're going to peace out probably. The Russians just don't have much to hold on to there. I will say that the alliance credit rules feel like they're half-baked because the conditions that make things go up and down, like it feels incomplete, like there's probably other things that should factor in. And there's also this element of like, well, what if I take my capital back? Does that restore the couple of points to everybody? And it just doesn't feel all the way thought out. Like it's maybe 60% of the way there. I can still play with the alliance credit system in this campaign, and I certainly will. It doesn't feel all the way complete, which you could somewhat say for a lot of this game. There's just these little blemishes that you wish had been finished off with another coat of paint, maybe, and it would have been what it needed to be. It's still a good. I'm still having fun, and this is a good game. It's just I see these little flaws, these little cracks that I wish could get filled in more coherently. So as we get into the uh, with the Russians basically getting beat out, and a high likelihood that we're going to see the Austrians, lose. We do want to think about what will come next when the time comes. So we'll be thinking on that. So I think we're going to go right into the winter turn. There's a lot of leaders. There's a lot of units that got moved off from being wounded. In fact, Napoleon only has Ney with him right now, or not Ney with him. I'm sorry, Murat with him right now. Though Davout will probably jump in with him here. Since we control Vienna, it is garrisoned. We're not going to lose it. We can simply jump right into it. Anyway, let me think if there's anything else to think of. This winter turn could end early, and then we'll be doing the spring phase, which takes a while. But so far, I mean, so good. So far in terms of like playing the history, I think besides the whole naval thing, I think the game's been feels pretty good for the history. And then the whole naval situation is just coming down to dumb luck. And the British actually did lose a fleet. They tried to take the channel back. They got rebuffed. They're now really at the point of naval collapse if they're not careful. There's not much that they can do. Oh, actually, I forgot to try to make a breakout down here at Gibraltar, so I might just do that. Okay, that Gibraltar fleet tried to come out, and once again, it was nearly tied, and they just can't break out. So this is tough for the coalition right now. I will say that. So we'll start the winter turn, and we'll pull the first chit, which is a coalition land 4, which it'd be good for the Russians because then they'd get to decide what they want to do here. I think the only option that they really have in terms of activating units is actually Charles. So let me play through a little bit and we'll see what happens. I think this army is going to get destroyed is probably what's going to happen. Okay, so I've gone ahead and just played through. Winter came kind of midway through, I guess. There's still a number of chits left in the cup, but certainly we've reached a kind of a decent decision point on how well the French did. I think they did pretty well, but their armies are battered, tired, and in need of replenishment. That is for certain. As it stands right now, there is no Austrian army left, and the Russian army that was in Austria was destroyed. So we kind of did a pincer maneuver here, chased the Austrian army back, and it was eventually just destroyed. And I forgot to set all the units over there. There we go. Got stuck between Davout and the army of Italy, which marched to the sound of guns and fought in the mountain pass there. The Neapolitans did try to take the papacy back, but were pushed back with a step loss. The Spanish have finished sieging down Lisbon, and so Portugal will be conquered. And despite some attempts by the British Navy to get out or to do something, they're basically continuing to be constrained here, and it's really bad shape for the British. To be honest, they're in trouble, deep trouble, in fact. So that's going to be a problem. They continue to be blockaded at Gibraltar, and then there's a fleet in the North Sea that relieved the blockade of Amsterdam and are kind of blocking in one of the British fleets there. You can see right over there. And then we do have a Spanish-French fleet in the Channel, which means Britain is potentially under direct threat. Which at the beginning of this campaign, I said how unlikely it is to even worry about that. And it's true. In 1805, I think it's really hard to get to this state. Like the fact that the dice have gone the way that they have is highly unlikely. But even then, there are strategy ideas that, oh, you put Napoleon over there in Britain. I think you have to be really careful of that, to be honest. And it's hard to even keep an army and supply over there, even if you control the channel. So, at most, we could see an 1806 invasion of Britain. That is looking like it's going to be feasible, though Britain will be doing everything they can to stop it. Meanwhile, Austria has been laid low, and they will certainly be seeking peace. They are at zero on alliance credit anyway, and all the conditions for control are there. Napoleon even grabbed Prague just because he could. And so at this point, without the Russians really posing a true threat, the Russians are even down to 2 alliance credit, which means, while Britain could potentially try to buy them back up a little bit, in all likelihood, as the Prussians are defeated, the Russians will probably be willing to sign a peace treaty, in all likelihood. So that's probably what we're going to see happen. And I would not count that as a peace proposal from Russia does not mean it's been conquered, right? It just means that they were willing to peace out for some some peace clauses. Anyway, so let's take a look at the peace phase. So again, what we're going to have here is Portugal has been conquered by Spain. So we're going to remove this control marker. We're going to just put a yellow one here representing the control of that province area. We'll move these away. So these are controlled fortresses by Spain. Spain controls all of the peninsula here, except for Gibraltar, I guess. But that's maybe what these guys are going to focus on as they can head down. The papacy, likewise, is now under French control. So we can put a French marker here. I think we would say they get annexed into. Well, let's see. What's Tuscany? Tuscany is it's considered part of France, or is it part of Italy? It's weird. I guess we'll say France conquers the papacy, for what it's worth. Annexes the papacy, and then. Okay, I see what's going on. Right. Okay, yeah. Papacy gets annexed by France, so they are controlled by France, which means we can leave the capital uncontrolled in the future and finally push back on the Neapolitans. The Hansa is conquered by France. Now, for what it's worth, I think because they're not adjacent, we either say the Hansa is just released again, I guess would be the. Oh no, we can annex it. I guess we annex the Hansa. I don't know how else we can do it, or if it should be part of Westphalia or something, but we'll say that France does annex the Hansa or make it a client state. I'm not sure which one will matter. I'll have to review this offline. And then Austria is effectively knocked out. Now the question is, there's a choice to be made here. There's a choice to be made. One is the Austrians have to decide, do they fight on for 2 more seasons, in which case they stay at war, and during the production phase for spring, they could actually place some armies here. They actually can do that. That is feasible for them to do it. They can. That is an option. However, if we do that and the French maintain control, which would likely mean, France continues to be at war with Russia and Britain and Austria, but France maintains control, which is again pretty feasible. Then Austria would have to pay back double the peace clauses, which means that much more money, and or potentially making them a mandatory ally and then giving them even greater strength. So I think I need to maybe sit here for a minute and figure out what makes sense. The historical path is obviously they go ahead and take the four peace clause surrender or peace deal, whatever you want to look at it, rather than the eight clause one and try to fight it out. Do I think they could, what would be the net effect of keeping fighting on? Well, it means France can't decide to go after Prussia because they're going to be too busy still putting down, Austria. They'll still have to fight Russia, which actually could be advantageous. The only problem will be that they already control the territories, which will mean that Austria's production will be reduced, and all that might happen is Russia decides to peace out when any Austrian armies get defeated badly enough. Russia just drops from the war anyway. Uh, and given that Britain is about to get invaded, it's not as though Austria has a lot of options to get in there. So it might be better for Austria to just peace out, rebuild its army, and be ready to come back, in 1809 or whatever, and keep the fight up. Um, I don't know. I got to think on it. Okay, so I figured out that I'm going to go ahead and the let the peace deal happen now rather than later. Because again, I think if it just continues the same, the Austrian production will be limited, and by the loss of the loss of the territories, and then the French are just in a better position to basically retain control. It would, if we decided to keep fighting, it would mean Prussia has an opportunity to come in later on the Allied side, the coalition side. But we still got to roll for it rather than maybe have the French declare war on Prussia and just go after them now. So this is one of those situations where I don't think we want to keep fighting. I think we need to hold back and recover. And it is going to mean that we're going to have to give up stuff as the Austrians. But that's better than being put into a mandatory alliance and all these other awful things that could come with 8 peace clauses. We just do not want to do that right now. It would be very bad. So we'll go ahead and let the peace happen. It's going to keep us on the rails of history a little bit. In the deals that I put into effect were France is saying they're going to annex Tyrol into Bavaria, and then Venice, Venetia to Italy, which is on par historical. So those are the 2 of the 4 clauses that the French side of my brain admits to or asks for. And then the Austrian player, effectively Britain, is now going to say that they'll do war indemnities, which means whatever production Austria does get here next turn for spring, I think it's half will go to France. It's better to just give them money than to give them anything else right now, because the only other options are either extending the peace deal, which we don't necessarily want, or a bunch of other things that also help France. So it's like a one time here, have some more money. That's still probably better than many of the other things that could happen, and especially knowing that if Russia drops, then it's going to be even more of a pain in the butt. Now, the funny thing about this with the mandatory peace is I rolled 2 dice. That determines how many turns or seasons the mandatory peace has to be in place, meaning, France and Austria can't fight. And I ended up rolling 9. So a little over 2 years, basically, Austria is cannot cannot be fought by excuse me, cannot fight France. France can't fight Austria, and Austria cannot be influenced diplomatically. So Austria is effectively out of the game for a while. The one special thing is the conquering power, France, can actually continue to move through Austrian territory at its leisure, but it cannot use Austrian fortresses as supply links, and all the fortresses that are still in Austrian territory actually flip back to Austrian, which means that these guys are still in supply because they can trace to Venice. Now we control Innsbruck for all that matters. We don't control Salzburg, but Napoleon is still in supply because he traces to this depot, which then traces to Ratisbon, and then that's French territory. So no major supply issues, and then the path into Prussian territory as needed is certainly there as we look at what's the situation look like when it comes to fighting Prussia. And now, again, before we even think about fighting Prussia, we're going to have production. Everyone's going to have production, including Prussia, which will make things a little bit different, right? Of just who's fighting who and to what degree. And keep in mind that Naples is still fighting the French because Naples is an ally to Britain, not Austria. That relationship does matter, like which major power is that minor power attached to, and I keep track of that in a spreadsheet. So they're still going to be fighting on the Italian peninsula, but Portugal is out, so that's going to relieve some pressure on the Spanish, and then various other things are going to be at work. I think Spain is actually feeling really good because Spain will get to build up its own set of forces and be pretty happy. And Britain's really not in a position to help them out at all, really. So the one interesting thing is I think Gibraltar is considered British home territory, so they may be able to build an army there. I'm not sure. I'm going to have to look at that. That could be maybe the big difference for the British, but they're going to maybe get conquered, so I'm thinking they build their units in Britain rather than in Gibraltar. Do you want to risk being a distraction and lose the game or what? I think are the big key things there. So anyway, that's it for 1805, which was only a summer, fall, and winter turn. But the Russians got their asses kicked. The Austrians got their asses kicked by Napoleon. We have reached a peace. I've got a little note here to remind mandatory peace until the end of spring 1808. So summer 1808, Austria could be manipulated into war one way or the other. And yeah, so we're going to have an opportunity to do production and all that stuff before more campaigning. From here, guys, what I'm going to do, I went through this video faster and didn't show as much because I want to make sure we can get through these videos quickly. This is a long campaign. It could be a while before we're done. We're only basically done with 1 year out of several. The future videos will also be pretty quick, and I will not do production on camera, and I'll tend not to do diplomacy on camera either, just because that's a lot of chart lookups and die rolling and stuff that would take time on camera. So I'm sorry if there are folks out there that really want to watch every single thing. I can't afford to do that in terms of time. Like just showing that and explaining it along the way takes so much more time than if I'm just quiet and I'm just moving stuff quickly across the board. It's preferred to do it that way right now with as big a game as this is. If this was a smaller game, I'd probably show more of that. So yeah, that's it for 1805, guys. In the next video, we'll be in 1806 with production and the initial diplomacy already done. We'll probably have some more cards to show for both sides and all that good fun stuff. So I think it's shaping up to be an interesting one, and we'll go from there. I will say, as I just realized, the Swedish units I have totally forgotten about and ignored. So that's kind of bad for the British. They should be using those guys to do something, maybe get back into the Hansa or something, but I just didn't get there. I didn't think about using them. That fleet could maybe help the British, but it's hard to say. So anyway, that's it, guys. We will see ya in the next one. Take care. Keep gaming.